Well, welcome to season 2, episode 3 of My Life in Football, of course, for the Southern League. And of course, we've been really lucky from people that have been joining us season 1 and season 2. And somebody that I've got to know quite well in over the last sort of 12 months to 18 months, of course, is the current secretary. Is that still how we were saying it, Greg? Greg from Sholing.
Yeah. Technically, it's my last week, Dave, but I'm handing over on the 1st of June. But our last game is tomorrow night. So it's my last official game in charge as secretary. But yeah, stepping down after 13 years.
I mean, is that, with that, though, last game, as you say, tomorrow, is that cup final?
Yeah, Senior Cup final, probably the most prestigious cup final in the area in Southampton. And you've got the two best teams are going to be competing in the form of AFC Tottenham and Sholing. So a great advert for the Southern League as well.
And of course, you'll be hoping to get the win like you did the last time you played.
Yeah, we've not lost to them in the league, so we've lost to them in cup matches before, but in the league we've done all right. So much to their frustration, but. Dave, at the end of the day, I think the occasion is going to be a great occasion. I've been told this morning over 1,200 tickets have already been sold for the final, so I'm sure there'll be more walk-ins tomorrow night as well. So it sounds like it's going to be a great atmosphere there. And for me personally, I just think that's like the icing on the cake, win or lose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where is it played at Southampton, and what other sort of what is there any senior clubs in yours? I mean, what sort of senior clubs actually take part in yours? Does Southampton and Portsmouth, all those take part in it, or am I in the area?
So this is the 103rd year of the competition. So 3 years ago, Southampton Football Club did enter it, which they're entitled to. They entered it as it was a centenary year, and their under 23s did win the competition. But probably the most senior team that entered it this year would have been Winchester City. So effectively, it's the cup where all the local Saturday teams get their chance to play against technically the big boys. And as they move through the competition, if they're still in the competition and they draw, for argument's sake, Sholing or Tottenham, what generally happens is that match won't be played on a Saturday, it'll be played midweek, and then it will get swapped to the ground, Tottenham or Sholing. And of course, that is sort of becomes their cup final, because those boys very, very rarely play at grounds of that standard and under floodlights. So when they turn up, they treat it as their own cup final. So the competition, as I say, has been going for 103 years, and it's a really prestigious trophy to win. Sholing have won the trophy 9 times. Tottenham, off the top of my head, I think have won it 4. So yeah.
And is that at St Mary's?
Yeah, St Mary's Stadium. Yeah, so tickets are still available, Dave, if you want to drive down. I've got a couple of hospitality tickets if you want them.
Is it now a case of like it was? Of course, you're going to play. You can't necessarily now bill it as being playing at a Premiership ground. You have to say you're at a Championship ground.
We're still in the Premiership at the moment until the end of the season.
And trust me, I've got an interview with a certain Mr. Matt Letizia later in the week. I don't think I'll be talking about Championship then.
Yeah, I think we still class it as a Premiership ground for the next couple of weeks.
So Greg, let's go. Let's start. We've saying what's coming on tomorrow, but let's go right the way back. How did Greg sort of get involved in football in the first place? What was the first, sort of putting your big toe into football in the first place? Was it sort of playing at school and that sort of area?
Yeah, school football basically. Left school at 16. Took out an apprenticeship at 16. Worked within Southampton Docks. There were back in the early 70s. There were 2 sort of job options that you could take. One was Southampton Docks, or the other one was Vosper Thornycrofts. I was fortunate enough to be offered an apprenticeship for both companies. Having lived right next door to Vosper Thornycrofts, I thought my better option was to go to the docks, because my memory as a youngster was all these guys pinned up against a barrier waiting to be released sort of at 5 o'clock to come out. And I thought, do I really want to go into that environment? So I chose British Transport Dock Board, and went there. My boss was a guy called John Roberts, who was very, very renowned in the sports scene. And he found out that I played badminton for the county. So he introduced me to BTC Badminton Club. And also he knew that I had a love of football. So he got me playing for BTC, which is now BTC Southampton in the area. They've still evolved. So John was really my first sort of push into local grassroots football. And I knew I was never, ever going to be great enough to proceed up the pyramid, really. But I did get the chance to play in the Hampshire League in the early days. And but at 26, I picked up quite a really bad knee injury. And as an electrician, that was my main income. I really had to concentrate on work. And ironically, back in 81 was where I first really got involved with Dave Diaper, really, because Dave had his own electrical business. I was an electrical contractor, and I subcontracted it for a few years. And then when we looked back over our time, we'd sort of played football against one another back in our school days, ironically. So I've got quite a longevity with Dave Diaper, really. So I suppose it was only natural that I ended up where I've ended up. But at 26, I got involved with a local works team, took up management, and that was a Sunday team. And we ended up changing our names like 3 times. And then I got involved with the group of boys that I had, and we had a team called Swadelin. We played in the New Forest League, and we really did really well there. But one of the problems that we had, and it's still an ongoing thing, Dave, the fact back then, like now, there was the shortage of referees. And so as the home club, you were always expected to provide a referee, and I was the one that was like always delegated to referee, and the boys hated me refereeing. Thought I was really, really biased to the opposition. But I think your mindset, I think you try to be fair, and you over egg it maybe, and you sort of come across as though you're favouring the opposition. And my final season with them, when we won the league and the cup, the local referee's appointment secretary, Fred Sturgis, came up to me and said, do you know where Mullard's building is? And I said, yeah, of course, Fred, just down the road. Why? He said, I want you there on Monday night. I said, what for? He said, I want you to take the referee's course. Well, I won't tell you what I said to him exactly, but I told him to go away. I said, Fred, I hate referees. I said, you know that when I played. Anyway, I went there on the Monday night. I just lost my dad. I just split up from my wife as well. So 91, 92 was a pretty bad year for me, sort of mentally, really. And a friend of mine that I worked with on the building site, he sort of said to me, you really need to get your act together again. He said, why don't you carry on this refereeing? So I pursued it, and then basically got involved in the world of refereeing. So I went from player, manager to referee, which I think is probably the normal course for non-league football in most cases, Dave. And then I had 3 consecutive years where I was fortunate enough to get my promotion. I think that was mainly because as an ex-player, I understood why players made the tackles they did. I remember telling players I used to tackle like that and stuff like that. So I tried to manage it more than discipline it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And So moving on from there, I was second year I was refereeing. I was invited by Ted Waters onto the Wessex League line, and went to some really what I felt then was really good grounds, and really enjoyed my time on the line. And basically what I did was I studied the referees that I went out with, and I sort of watched what they did and thought, oh, I like the way he did that, or I didn't like the way he did that. And I suppose in the end, that's the way I developed my style of refereeing, by watching on the line. And I think that would be my advice to any assistant referee if they want to progress, is to watch what the referee does and try and work out what the good and bad things are that they do, and try and develop the game that way. Then in my third year, I came to an awkward crossroads, and it was really awkward because prior to this, you could go on both leagues. You could go on the Wessex League and you could go on the Hampshire League. So you could go on the league as an assistant referee, and you could referee on the Hampshire League. Anyway, this third year, I got invited by Paul Scoble to go on the Hampshire League as a referee, and Ted Waters invited me back as an assistant referee. And so I was, what was I, 36 then, and I sort of basically said to him, Ted, what do I do? And he said, well, you've got to choose one or the other now. There's none of this joint officiating on two leagues. And I said, I enjoy doing both. And he said, well, you've got to make a decision. And he said, I want you to join the Wessex League. And I said, okay, then how long is it going to take me to get to Wessex League Middle? And he went, maybe another 4 seasons. I said, you're joking. He went, no, you've got to serve an apprenticeship. So my mind was made up, and I went to the Hampshire League. It was a no-brainer, really. And I then done 10 seasons on the Hampshire League. Again, had some really good games, some good cup finals. Went out with some really great friends that I'm still friends with now during that time. And then in 2004, the league changed, and it was promoting. It was forming it formed a new league called Hampshire League 2004. They were like a breakaway group, and it took on some of the referees, but not all of us, and we were sort of left in a little bit of limbo. So Dennis Chalice, who was then in charge at the Wessex League, had a conversation with him, or somebody got in contact with him, and then he contacted me, and he come and said to me, Greg, you've been on the Wessex League before, would you like to come back as an assistant referee? And I went, I wouldn't mind refereeing if I get the opportunity. I said, I can get through the fitness test, no problem at all. He said, look, we've got a real bunch of young referees being pushed through the system now. And what we're looking for is experienced match officials who can go out and support them. And so I said, yeah, okay. And I thought, if I'm an assistant referee, I've got all the pressures of being a referee and stuff like that. So I thought it was an easy gig, to be honest, Dave. And again, really enjoyed it. Went back to grounds that I've been to in the past as well. And all of a sudden, we started getting these young referees that we were being appointed to. And the most funniest things was the fact that we were arriving at grounds, and clubs that didn't necessarily know us were coming up and saying, oh, afternoon, ref. And we go, no, sorry, mate, it's him over there. And pointing to the youngsters, and they were like, really? That's our referee for today? And I'm like, yeah, that's your referee.
So, I mean, with your injury though, Greg, I mean, how did that come about?
It was a knee injury, and because of my work, I was like constantly on my electrician. You're on your knees and stuff like that. So that's how I had to sort of give it up. But I found when I went back to refereeing, that I didn't seem to have the issue that I had with my knee. So I was mindful of it. In fact, what did transpire was my knee injury that I had when I was 26 developed into an ankle injury when I was refereeing. So I was one of the boys that used to sit in the changing rooms as a team of three, and there'd always be two of us strapping our bodies up, basically.
I mean, you also say, you know, bit that, you know, we've spoken about as well. And I just think it's hilariously funny, in all fairness, but you can see it happening even these days. But please tell me how you win a League and Cup double in 91, 92 and still get the sack. I mean, what is that about?
Oh, yeah, that's a great story. I'm still friends with most of the boys as well. So in my day as a manager, which was my last season as a manager, I have to say, we won the League and Cup double with a team called Swadelin, and we played in the New Forest League, and we all drunk in a pub called the Mason Arms, which is no longer there in Southampton, unfortunately. And the landlord, Billy Grumbridge, good friend of mine, was a mad, passionate Arsenal supporter for all of his sins, but he
Good on the lad. Good on the lad. Yeah.
He knew I was a passionate Chelsea fan. And, so we used to drink in there afterwards, and anyway, basically it was, I suppose, the precursor of sponsorship and stuff like that, Dave. Really, and as I say, Bill was really passionate about his football, and he wanted to get into football in some way, some form or other. And anyway, it just transpired that he persuaded the boys that he would sponsor the team, get the name changed to the Mason Arms and stuff like that. And the boys had a meeting and said that, Greg, you know, we've had a sort of great 4 years with you, but we really like Bill to take over from us. And I'm like, yeah, okay then. I walk out on a high, basically. So effectively sacked as a double winning manager. So that's that's good to have on my CV.
That's like you've really have followed the Chelsea path then.
Yeah, more ways than one. Yeah. I'll give you a quick summary of my Chelsea connection, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people, when I talk to them, think it's a jumping on the bandwagon thing. But my cousin, he played at Chelsea in the youth setup and everything. So I followed his career as a youngster as well. He lives at Bexhill now, Burgess Hill now he lives at, and he's still a season ticket holder at Stamford Bridge as well. So we're always in constant contact. But that's where my affinity of Chelsea goes, right the way back to the early 70s, not the Abramovich years and stuff like that. So.
I suppose we've got, you know, I mean, it's my life in football. So I mean, what is going on down there
at Chelsea? Oh, yeah. It's so difficult. I think it probably goes back to the first time Lampard came in, took charge, Dave. Maybe when the transfer embargo was there, he was restricted on what players he could bring in. And I think it's just been a roller coaster from there, really. And we all know what the expectations are at the top of the pyramid, and you've only got to look at all the managerial changes that go on in a season. It's phenomenal sometimes, the shortage of time that people are given. You know, you could look at, say, the same with Southampton, but at the top end of the pyramid, managers chop and change. You know, I really thought the Graham Potter appointment, as much as I like Graham as a manager, I really I said at the time that I was worried for his future because I thought that Chelsea's expectation would have been that much greater of him. And I think he was on immediate pressure as soon as he went in, to be honest.
So, I mean, looking from the outside in, I just think Chelsea have got a manager there that they should have used beforehand. I know they've gone and looks like it's going to be Pochettino, but there's a manager for me inside your club sitting there waiting to take the reins, and I think will bring the glory days back to your club. Now, when I mention the person's name, you're probably going to look at me and think I'm absolutely bonkers. But for me, this person, I think, would be absolutely ideal to be the next Chelsea manager instead of Pochettino. And that's a certain person by the name of Emma Hayes.
Yeah, mate, I don't disagree with you. Do you know what, Dave? We've had a similar conversation about when will be the first female manager in the Premier League, and you're right. You know, I think you've got to look at her and see. You know, you look at some of the women managers that are around. You know, the Lionesses have sort of benefited from it as well. You know, so why not take that chance? You know,
I think I think for me as well, Greg, it's a little bit disparaging. You know, when you hear people talk on social media and talk, you know, privately, and they say, "Oh, well, yeah, but if she comes into a job, then she needs to come into a job, you know, with somebody like Barnet or you know, or AFC Wimbledon." Hang on, we're talking about a Champions League finalist manager that has won numerous Premier Leagues, shall we say, or WSLs, whichever you want to call it, but putting it in some type of context. She's managing, you know, some of the top players in the world. Why then does she then say, well, on my CV, I'm this, won the league 3 years, and well, it's going to be 3 years in a row, 4 years in a row, whatever it is, in a few weeks' time. You know, FA Cup winner so many times. And why then does that mean that just because she's a woman, she's got to go down and referee AFC Wimbledon? Because I think the Chelsea men, or even the Arsenal men, or whoever, would take her very, very seriously. And she's the type of woman you certainly won't be messing with.
No, I totally agree. And I think also, Dave, sort of moving that along a little bit as well, you could also sort of question why there's not enough black managers in the football world. You know, because there are some really, really good coaches, stroke managers out there that are just not being given the opportunity. You know, I think we could make this into a totally different show, mate. We go down this route.
So, I mean, going back to your sort of refereeing, and there's one interesting fact in here that, you know, that I've seen, and I suppose it sort of comes into sort of I don't know, into the mind's eye because of what's going on tomorrow. But I mean, I got a bit in here. It says, where was it? When you called it, was it Dan Cook when he had to call off his first ever match in 2007? I mean, tell us what the significance was of that match being called off.
Well, it was a really strange weekend, to be honest, Dave, because I can remember it as though it was absolutely yesterday. The match was between Downton and AFC Tottenham. It was in 2007, so it was the FA Vars year for AFC Tottenham, and it was right at the end of the season. And what had actually happened that particular day was Noah had come to the Wessex region and brought his arc down, because every single game in the Wessex League had been called off that day, apart from Downton and AFC Tottenham. And Salisbury were also playing at home, and their match had been called off, and their game was being covered on the radio by Spire FM. Spire FM had got in contact with Downton and said, is your match still on? If it is, we'd like to bring the radio commentary team down to you and cover the game. So Downton have said, yes, the game is on. We travel down, the other assistant and myself travelled with Dan Cook down to Downton. Dan was in his first season on the Wessex League line. And for anyone that doesn't know Dan, now referees in the Football League. So I'm not saying that's my claim to fame, but but he's been fortunate enough to make it right the way through the pyramid. So we arrived. Well, we were driving to the game, kept on thinking, crikey, is this game going to be on? Because the rain was just torrential. We arrived at the ground, and the rain just stopped. And Downton's ground at the time was sort of peat-based pitch and everything. And when we arrived, there were all these guys out on the pitch trying to sweep water off and everything. And going back to the similar story that I said, these two guys they saw us get out of the car together, and they come running over, and he comes straight to me and he went, ref, we've got to play this game today. I said, okay, mate. I said, I'm not the referee. I said, Dan's your referee. And he looked and he sort of said, are you sure? I said, yeah. I said, Dan's your referee. I said, me and Will Penny are the assistant referees. And he's going, oh, okay. Oh, well, we need to play this game. And said, okay, what's the desperation for the game? Well, Tottenham have got players suspended, and we've got a chance to beat them. So that was basically what their argument was. And at the time, exactly the same thing. Tottenham manager came over to us and said, ref, you've got to get this game on. We need to cut the players that need to play this game. Otherwise, they'll be suspended for the FA Vase final. And anyway, we were like, what? All these people were like pressurising us to get the game on. The guys that were sweeping the pitch off and saying, look, ref, the ball will go through this water and everything. And then we had back in the day, then it was an assessor, not an observer. So the assessor is now there as well. So we're talking to him, and he's on saying, so guys, what do you think? Do you reckon this is going to be on or not? And Dan said, well, we've got to play it, haven't we? We've got to play it because Tottenham need. And so what we had to do, we had to try and sort of break him away from all the groups of people that were putting pressure on him. And we had to sort of, I remember we walked down to the bottom goal at the 18-yard line where the D was, and that was just covered in water. And it didn't matter how often he put a broom across it, the water just came straight back. And what we basically did was, Dan was like, I really don't know what to do. So, right, let's go back to the laws of the game, Dan. And he said, what do you mean? Well, let's go back to law 1. What's your powers and duties as a referee? And we went, well, safety of the players and everything. Right, okay, then let's give you a scenario. First tackle goes in that water. What are you actually going to do? And he just looked at us and said, I've really got to call this off, haven't I? So we've got all these. There must have been. I don't know what the gate that was never ever given out, but there must have been about 300-400 people that had converged on Downton because they found out this was the only game that was on. So we then had to have the most incredible walk of shame, basically, because we didn't even take our kit out of the car. We left it in the car, but we had to go in the bar to go and collect our money because we got paid half our match fee and everything with the game being called off. And we were the worst people since sliced bread, mate, when we got in that bar, and it was horrendous. The abuse we took in there was something else. But you know, it's just one of those funny quirks that happen in your football career, and that was one that I remember really, really clearly. And I just love the fact that Dan has progressed and, you know, made it all the way up the pyramid to where he is now, you know. So it's great to have on my CV. I've got another story I can tell you about Keith Stroud.
Yeah, go for it.
Right. So Wessex League Line, and we're going to Cowes on the Isle of Wight, and they're playing BAT Sport. Keith Stroud is reappointed to this match. So me and Keith, we meet up at the Red Jet in Southampton, and Ian Smith, the assistant referee, he's on the Isle of Wight. He is meeting us the Red Jet to take us to Cow Sports. So that was what our arrangement was. We're travelling across on the Red Jet, and Keith gets a phone call, and all I hear him say is, "No, mate, no, I'm definitely not on the game. No, somebody else should be picking you up." He should have been doing a local Bournemouth game, but obviously got brought onto the Wessex League. So we're sat there, and he turned around and said, "Crikey," he said, "that's a bit of a nightmare for him, isn't it?" Anyway, we get to Cows. Ian picks us up. We go in the changing room. We go out. We do our pitch inspection and everything, and we come back in. We come back into the changing rooms, and Ian's starting to get ready. Me and Keith start getting our kit out, and Keith is like a madman going through his kit bag, and he suddenly realised he's got everything in his kit bag apart from shorts. Now, Keith is, I would say, almost half my size, so I always took two of everything. So I'm like thinking, yeah, okay. So I said, "Keith, I can lend you a pair of my shorts." And I went into my bag, and I actually only had one pair of shorts. So the secretary of Cow Sports came in, and Keith turned around and said to him, he said, "Look," he said, "it's a little embarrassing, mate." He said, "If you can keep it on the QT," he said, could you supply us with a pair of black shorts?" He said, I've actually left my shorts at home." So the secretary said, "Yeah, don't worry." Anyway, they had this goalkeeper who was rather larger than me, and anyway, they come into the changing room. These shorts are all they go. Keith opens these shorts up, and they were like twice the size of him. And I looked at him, and Ian was like already changed, and he wasn't even interested in what was going on. He was just doing his own little thing. So I'm like looking at Keith, and I'm like saying, "Well, if they've got string in them, Keith, I can wear them." And he said, "You sure?" And I went, "Yeah." So I put them on, and I gave him mine. So we both had to sort of really tie our shorts up, basically. And anyway, we get announced out onto the pitch. We walk out, and the skipper keeps on looking at Keith, and I'm like thinking, what's his problem? Anyway, we get out. We get to the centre. I go off and check the net, and the goalkeeper went, "Like your shorts, Lino." And I went, Don't say anything, mate." Anyway, we come back to the centre spot, and then the captain is like looking Keith up and down and said, "Oh, you're smartly dressed then, Ref." And Keith went, "Yeah, of course I am, mate." Just sort of tried to brush it all off. Didn't even bother looking at me. And then we go over, and I go over onto the far side, so I'm away from the crowd, and I've got like Stadloff and Warder stood behind me, basically. The two ancient supporters of Cows, right behind my line, and they kept on saying, "Lino, really like your shorts," and I'm like just trying to ignore them, because these shorts were, even for me, were probably 3 times too big for me, and to make it worse, they had the Cows Sports logo on the shorts as well. And anyway, about 20 minutes into the game, there've been quite a few throw-ins, but this one particular player, he came over, and the ball was right by me, and he goes, "Lino, kick the ball to me." And I said, "No, I'm not allowed to touch it, man." And he goes, "Oh, come on," he said, "just pass it to me." So anyway, he had to come right almost to my foot, and I walked away. And as he bent down to pick the ball up, he suddenly turned around and he went, lads, he said, "It's not the referee that lost his shorts." He said, "It's the effing Lino," he says. So of course, so Keith had all the pressure taken off of him. We're back on the Red Jet going back, and he said to me, he said, "Thanks very much for today." He said, "I suppose I better mark you 10 out of 10 today, haven't I?" For what you've done. So he just took my performance out of the window. The fact that I got him out of trouble, he marked me 10 out of 10 for my performance that day. So that was another. And Keith will, when he goes round to the referees society, I have been in his presence, and he's actually mentioned that a few times. So he remembers it fondly as well. But I was with Keith the other night at the Bemerton AFC Porchester final match, and it was good to see, and it's good to see that he's still actively involved refereeing.
And you've never been back to Cowes since, no?
I'm not sure he has. I've been back there a few times. Yeah. So there's along your way. I suppose, Dave, this sort of program that you're doing probably highlights the fact that maybe those of us that have been around in football a long time might need to sort of sit down and write our memoirs down. Maybe, I don't know. Because,
I think so. I mean, you talk to a lot of people, and they say this is like season 2 of the show, and some of the stories are absolutely outstanding. That you get to listen, because no disrespect, I don't know your backstory. I don't know, like Lee Allenson, who we do next, his backstory, but it's interesting to learn and to know more about the person and some of the funny stories. And I'll be honest with you, the hours that we do this with, and I just thoroughly enjoy every single one of them. I just think it's hilariously, some of them are hilariously funny, some of them are very sad, but there's some great stories along the way as you talk to people. But you were saying about the FA Vars, and of course then a year later your knee injury flares up again, and that's the end of your refereeing and running the line.
Yeah, basically, yeah. In that final year, I've got one more story. Dan Berry, another young referee. We were doing Verwood and Over New Street, I think, were the opposition. And back then, the clubs had to phone their results in. They used to phone in at half time and full time as well. And basically, what happened was a fullback in front of me. Not really sure why he did it, because he didn't have to really do it, but he wasn't under pressure. There was no player around him. He decided, rather than letting the ball drop down to his feet, he decided he was going to head the ball. And as he headed the ball away, he came down and snapped his ankle right in front of me. And again, it was a horrendous sound. Knew straight away, and he sort of just went into shock. There was none of this rolling around on the pitch and everything like we sort of see nowadays. And straight away, as soon as Dan came over, I said to him, I said, I'm sure he's broke his ankle, Dave, Dan, and he sort of went into panic mode. We then had to obviously call for paramedics to come, but the biggest problem was it was over like 50 minutes. The delay was before the paramedics arrived, and again, he'd never been in this situation before. And basically, one of the things I suggested to him was to get the players off the pitch so that they kept warm. And sort of try and take the element of their player breaking his ankle, try and get that away from them as well. And so he insisted on getting them into the dressing room, and then it was a question of waiting for the paramedics to arrive. They eventually arrived, got the players safely away to hospital, but it was over an hour and a half before we were going back to restart the game. But the biggest problem was the players didn't want to go back out and play. So he was then in a dilemma. He's going, well, I've got to get them back out there. And I said, well, if they don't want to play, Dan, then you've got to sort of call the game off. He goes, I've never postponed a game before or abandoned the game, So again, that was another story, and Dan was another one who went on to line on the National League and everything as well. So another good young match official that come up through the ranks to the Wessex League, but you don't always get incidents like that throughout your career, and it's always sort of good that you can work together as a team to make that decision rather than the onus being on the one person. But in both cases of the situations I've told you, we actually did put the onus on the match official, but 100 50% support was from us as well. So effectively, we made it become his decision that the game was being called off, rather than say, well, it's our idea, you really should call this off. But we persuaded him that both of them, in both cases, that they had to make the decision to make them look good, to be fair, rather than other people making the judgment. But again, in both incidents, teams wanted to carry on, and that's always difficult. But you've got to be mindful, especially when it's a serious injury, of the mindset of the players and the coaching staff and the supporters as well. Because I think, especially in this day and age as well, Dave, that you got to be really mindful of that. I think paramedics are much better equipped now. I think the majority of clubs that you go to, the standard of physios are much better now. A lot of clubs work with more than one physio, which again is amazing. I know at Sholing we use two. We've got one who specialises in head trauma, and so again, I think that may be something clubs might need to look at in the future as well, for the safety of the game.
But I mean, you say Sholing, but I mean, you gave that sort of, football was then, refereeing football matches was sort of over for yourself, and then you moved on to sort of supporting VTFC. Now, I kind of looked at that and gone, who are VTFC? No idea who the VTFC are. Not a clue. Just a local team, probably. But then,
really,
so I honestly didn't know. No, and then
it's a precursor of Sholing.
Yeah, and then for 2 years,
What's for Thornycroft FC?
Yeah, and then sort of like it moves into show. But why? How did that happen? How did sort of VTFC sort of change from that to Sholing?
Again, going back to Southampton as a whole, the Southampton is split by the River Itching. So you got Southampton Docks on one side, and then you had Thornycrofts on the east side of the river, the shipbuilders. They did a lot of the military-based shipbuilding, and basically, as time progressed, they started off as John Thornycroft and Son. Then they just became Thornycrofts. Then they became Vospers. Then their name change was VT for Vosper Thornycroft. So the club has always been a works team as far back as, I think it's 1868. They originated as a team called Woolston Works. So it's always been part of the shipbuilding side. Hence, Sholing being called the Boatman, if people didn't realise that. So Dave Diaper joined the club in 1999, and when he left Otterbourne, he was a successful player and manager at the time. When he joined VT and Vospers, he had the vision to want to move the ground on, but it basically took 11 years for him to do that. And in 2010, when the Vosper company was eventually sold to BAE, they then moved into Portsmouth because the shipbuilding industry in Woolston closed down completely, and it is now just a mass of tower blocks looking over Southampton Water now. But that's where all the shipbuilding came from. So basically, they wanted to engage back into the community. Now, a lot of people get us mixed up with Sholing Sports, who were just up the road from where Sholing play now. And Dave felt that the only way we could get back into the community was to change the name of the club to the area that we're in, which is Sholing. But the irony is, Dave, as well, is we're not actually in Sholing. Because just outside, just down the road, literally 100 yards down the road towards Sholing, is the boundary. So rather than coming under Southampton City Council, we actually come under Eastleigh Borough Council because of the boundaries. So that's a sort of tad irony as well. But no, Dave felt Sholing FC was the right name to go back to. Vosper's, VTFC, Thornycroft's in their day were mainly sort of blue and white. They played in yellow and blue kits. Dave had them one year when they were VTFC playing in white shirts and red shorts. And when we went to Sholing, he made the decision that we would revert back to red and white stripes and black shorts. And the irony is as well, last season our away kit got changed to black and white stripes and black shorts, which was Sholing Sports' home kit. So a lot of elderly people still get us mixed up between the two teams, but there's no history between Sholing Sports and Sholing FC. Sholing totally come out of Wolston Works and then through the Thornycroft VT era. But Dave made the mindset to change the ground as well and get the ground enclosed. We always had the two pitches side by side. So in closing the ground, the second pitch was reallocated to the cricket section, and then we moved the second pitch that we had to the outside of our ground behind the far goal to keep the two pitches there. But 2010, the ground became completely enclosed to the stadium that it is now.
And of course, you took over then as secretary. And
not straight away. No, not straight away. As I say, I was a regular supporter with Marie, my partner, between 2008 and 10. Spent most of my time going to the home games at Sholing in 2008, and then Southampton when they were at home for my sins, and met he wasn't on their committee then, on the Sholing committee, but sadly no longer with us. I met a lovely guy called Ray Routledge, who was the club photographer. Not the official club photographer at the time, but he was just there as a photographer. He was really, really passionate about the club and everything. And I got talking to him, and I said, well, you know, since the age of 6, I've lived just down the road from the ground, you know, so this has always been my local ground and everything. And said I was never ever allowed to referee them at home. That was the only other thing. I refereed them away a few times back in the Hampshire League days, but never ever refereed them when they were at home. And got talking to him, and he said, "Oh, there's some really, really lovely people here." And I turned around and told him that I knew Dave Darker really, really well. And basically, start of the 2010 season, Colin Chamberlain, who was a good refereeing colleague of mine, he'd taken over being secretary a couple of years before, and he said that I really think you and Marie would be an asset to the club. And then Trevor Lewis, who's the he's the vice president of the club now, he turned around and said, "Greg, why don't you come and get involved in the football club?" He said, "I'm sure we can use you in some capacity." So Marie, my partner, took over running the turnstile. I came in and took over being the program editor, and was asked to take over doing the announcing for the PA. Not that I like to talk very much, but I was asked to take that role on. So I accepted to do that, and at the same time I was made Colin Chamberlain's assistant. So what I used to do on the secretarial side, all I used to do was I just used to phone in the cup scores. I never used to phone in the league scores. And Anyway, going into the 2011-12 season, Colin was diagnosed with cancer, and we were in August when he got the diagnosis, and he had a long chat with me and said, look, you know, I really don't think that I'm going to be able to put all my time into the club doing what I need to do while I'm going through my cancer treatment. I said, okay. He said, would you take on the role of secretary? And I'm like, not something I sort of planned to do, but you know, I sort of get the gist of it all. And anyway, for the next 2 weeks, I was like copied into all the emails, and then the final game in August, I believe, was on the 31st of August, if memory serves me right. Was going to be Colin's last game in charge as secretary, and then I was going to take over it on the Monday in September. So Jason Mills was informed about all this and everything. And
has he been going that long then? Has he, old Jason Mills? Dear me, eh?
That's why he's got no hair like me, Dave. And so I took on the role on the Monday morning, and my first task as a secretary at Sholing Football Club, another one for my CV, was an email from Jason with a £25 fine on it. And I'm like, oh my God, what on earth is this for? So I start reading it, and it transpired that on the Saturday, back then, you had to phone the results in, and you had, looking back, I really think you had a really, really tight window to get those results in, to be fair. I suppose I can say that quite freely now. So I read it, and we've been fined £25 for failing to phone in the result. So I'm like, crikey, I've got to go to Dave Diaper with this and tell him that we've been fined £25. My first job as secretary, we've been fined, right? So I managed to contact Colin. He lived just down the road from me, so it wasn't a problem. So I spoke to his wife and said, is it right if I pop down and see Colin? She said, yeah. And I said to him about it, and he goes, oh, mate, he said, I'm really sorry. He said, I tried phoning. He said, and the line was engaged all the time. He said, so I went home. He said, and I was going to phone the result in when I got home. He said, and I forgot all about it. I went, okay, no worries. So my first duty with Dave was to tell him about this fine. And I remember saying to him, I said, Dave, I said, I need to ask you a really serious question now. I said, when teams come to us, I said, do we have to provide them with kicking balls? He said, what are you on about? I said, well, when they warm up, I said, do we have to provide them with kicking balls? He went, no. I said, well, do you know you can get fined for it if they ask for them? And he said, really? He said, how do you know that? I said, because I bloody well sat down and read every single fine that you can be fined for in the handbook to make sure we don't get fined ever again. As a good secretary, I did fall foul to one or two of their fines throughout my time. But yeah, that was really my first task as a secretary, was to find out everything I could get fined for by the Southern League. But
I mean, it is quite funny. I did a match day secretary, so not the full sort of job that you did, you know, for Harlan. And I think one of the funniest games that I always remember, and I think we were playing Bath City, if I remember rightly. I think it was in the trophy. It might have been in the FA Cup, one or the other. And at the time, Harlow had got a player called Ibrahim Sonko that used to play for Reading and Stoke City and playing at the back. Yeah. Anyway, brute of a guy, one of the nicest guys you ever liked to meet, but a real sort of like, you know, empowering figure on the pitch, you know, and was sort of like the heartbeat of the whole team. And I remember sort of going into him and going into the manager, have you got the team sheet? So then I had a quick look at the team sheet, just being the excited fan that I was to see who was playing, and et cetera, et cetera. And I realised that he was one substitute short, but there was a substitute, you know, there was substitute short, but there was enough players out there warming up beforehand,
Yeah.
Us to be, well, why have we got a substitute short?
Mm.
So I turned around to him and went, you do realise you're one short? Oh, am I? Really? He went back and it was just happened to be a defender that he was short. He'd forgot to put the defender on the team sheet. So anyway, the game starts, getting put on, giving it in and all the rest of it. So he's all there ready to go. And I think it was about 20 minutes into the game, Sonko's gone up for a header. The striker's gone up for a header. And Sonko's got hit in the head quite badly to the extent that there was like a massive gash in his head, blood pouring out of everywhere. The club doctor's gone running down onto the pitch. And of course, they've wrapped him all up, got to come off, concussion maybe. And, didn't know what it was at the time. Took him off the pitch, but, he couldn't have carried on anyway because of the size of the cut in his head. And of course, they brought the player on that he'd missed off the team sheet. When you sit there and you think, and we managed to get a draw with Bath City then. And, we were what? I don't know, Isthmian North, I think, at the time. And they were, they were sort of up there in sort of, I don't know, Conference South or wherever they are. And we managed to get a draw, went up to Bath on the Tuesday night and beat them on their own pitch. And in probably one of the best nights of all time. Do you know what I mean? But you just still think back to that moment and think, well, what would have happened if, he wasn't on that team sheet? We could have been in a bit of trouble. But it is I think is it fair to say that a secretary job's a thankless job? If you're not,
I can actually give you a similar incident to that when I wasn't at a game, and it was it would have been I can't remember whether it was an FA Cup game or an FA Vars game now. But the game, I'm not sure why I didn't go to the game, to be honest, but I didn't go to Highworth Town the first time Sholing had to play them. It was in the cup match. And basically what had happened was I'd gone through all the players. We never used to sign all the players on to the first team from the reserves and things like that back then, Dave. And again, this generated into a lesson learned. So basically, what happened was I think I must have been with our reserve team, to be fair, and they went to Highworth. They played the game. We had a player sent off in the game, but we won the game, no problem at all. It wasn't until after the game that I realised that Dave had named a substitute that we didn't have registered with the first team. Fortunately, he didn't play him. He was on the bench, but he didn't play. And it was my fault. As far as Dave was concerned, he had a go at me, and he said, "What? Why did?" I said, "Well, you never told me you were using that player or anything like that." So, as I say, it was sort of a friendly argument that me and Dave fell out a few times over things. Always quickly forgotten in the heat of the moment, like you do. And since then, it's been a question of that. Everyone gets signed on to the first team, basically, so that it just made it so much easier. But again, it's to say it's a thankless job, Dave. I think the better secretaries, I don't want to disparage anybody, but I think the better secretaries make the job as easy as they can for themselves, if that makes sense. Maybe a little bit lower down the pyramid, you've got people that are club secretaries for the sake of being a club secretary, and because they're the only people that really would be forced to take that job on. And I think I've met some really, really good secretaries, managed to get some great advice off of guys and ladies around. We've got some really, really good female secretaries as well. And with where I am at the moment, one of the things that I'm going to offer in my spare time, because as you know, I'm now heavily involved with community radio, is why I'm moving on. One of the things that I'm going to offer to do with the Wessex League at Step 5 and Step 6 is become like a secretary coordinator for the clubs. So if any of the clubs have got secretaries that are not really doing their job properly, I've put a little program together of the things that secretaries need to be mindful of at step 5 and step 6. How to use full time, how to use whole game system, stuff like that, just to try and make their job easier and show them that the secretary's role can be easy if they go about it the right way. So that's where I'm at the moment.
You've had some fun days out with Sholing through the years, though, and I mean,
massively.
And I mean, it seems like we've spoken before. We've spoken with Dave as well, and a couple of his coaching staff, and sort of one-to-one interviews and stuff. And it just seemed like very much like a family club. But I mean, this year, I mean, for you to finish on sort of 2 cup finals, would you call them 2 cup finals? I mean, with the likes of the playoff final, and then. But how was the club? Was the club feeling a little bit like I'm feeling in the last week or so, being an Arsenal fan, being at the top for so long, and then sort of like getting caught at the last minute by AFC Tottenham? I mean, how did that feel sort of in your sort of last season, and then knowing you'd got to go through that the playoffs when that 5th place team is always that real bogey side, and then you've got sort of playing Hamworthy in the final. And I think if I'm right in saying you'd got a positive result against them, both times. So that was always in the back of your mind. Well, we've got 2. Is it their time to win it? What was the whole feeling like in that last sort of 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, you're so right, Dave. Week 1 we were 3rd, and then I think we went right the way through to the 35th week, top of the table. I used to have a little chart in the program with the 20 teams, and it targeted our position in the league. So the first week, the red dot was on number 3, and then the red dot was right the way across the top, number 1. So I think looking back, even in the build up to it, I think maybe 6 weeks before the season finished, I think we all felt that Tottenham had the edge on us. Even though they had more games to play than us, we always had the points in the bag, and most people would say it's preferable to have the points in the bag. We just felt that the luck was on Tottenham's side because a lot of their games they won 1-0. They won quite a few games in stoppage time, which we all know you've got to see out the full 90 plus minutes, not just 90 minutes. So match days for us, the 2 guys that used to be around the media hut with me, they'd be on Twitter keeping an eye on everything that was going on. And when they were like saying, "Oh, Tottenham have just scored like 3 minutes ago" or whatever, your heart sort of sinks really, and you're struggling with a 2-2 draw against Bideford at home, and stuff like that. But we dropped some really, really unnecessary points. But again, no disparity to any of the teams that have played in the Southern League, because some of the hardest teams that we played were teams from the bottom of the table. Your Bristol Manor Farms, your Bidefords. We only took 1 point off of Bideford, the whole season. And if you looked at where we were, you'd have to say that's an embarrassment, But we were really competitive against the top teams. But we managed to get a win down at Bristol Manor Farm. We had to grind out a lot of results. The biggest problem we had was a number of injuries where players played through injuries as well. And Dave was like really, really mindful of that. And it was like the players wanted to play as well. That was the other thing, Dave. They wanted to try and be positive, even though they were injured. They wanted to play. But I think the best thing that happened for the club because of that was this season in particular, the amount of younger players that Dave's been able to bring through. And I'll highlight one player that he had to bring in. and that 16-year-old Theo Widger in goal. Now, to come in and be the goalkeeper towards the run-in to the final games was, so much pressure on him. Talking to his mum and dad didn't want him to play, and things like that. He had an exceptional game at Willand on his debut. We then played at Exmouth. We were 3-0 up against Exmouth. Again, it was like a monsoon day weather-wise, and Exmouth dug in deep and pulled back the game to 3-2. So it was a bit of a knife edge as well. But then we had to use Theo in the playoff game. That was always going to be a pressure cooker against Wimborne. And there's a great photograph of Theo where he just spread himself like a star, and the ball came off his knee. He sort of, for someone that was 16 years of age, he had absolutely no fear. He was one of our sort of likely unsung heroes this season. Only played 4 games, but they were really 4 important games for the club, and gave us the belief that we could win it. And in both the playoff games, Dave, the game against Wimborne and Hamworthy, our first 45 minutes in both games were probably not the best football that we played, but the team talk, the mindset, the crowd. We had two fantastic crowds for both the playoffs. That was, the belief was there from the supporters, and not only was it Sholing supporters there, but we had other clubs coming down supporting us to go up as well, which was really grateful. We even had AFC Tottenham there watching as well. So there was the season as a whole has been the best for me personally. A lot of people say, well, was the FA Vars not the best? The FA Vars was great. The season for a secretary was absolutely horrendous, because what people didn't realise at the time was, while the FA Vars run was going on, we still had the first team going for the Wessex League, and we had our reserves going for the Wyvern League. So Dave was really, really mindful of how he had to be ensuring those players got rotated properly. And he did an absolutely fantastic job doing everything. And Dave's one of these people that he believes in all the people that work around him. And when we got to the final, I'll tell you now, the journey to the final was unbelievable, because there were 2 games we should never have won, to be honest. The one game that stands out in my mind is the Larkhall game. Larkhall probably have never ever forgiven us ever for that, but I think we're now friends with Larkhall again now, but it sort of has died away a little bit. But at the time, we should never have won that game, and we were fortunate enough to get through Wisbech maybe, and to have a 2-2 draw in the first leg at home to Eastbourne. Eastbourne probably took the pressure off us, because they went away thinking that they were through to the final. So it made our second leg going there a little bit easier, I think, and we changed the team around slightly. But what was great for me during that time was we had to go up to Wembley. I think we went up to Wembley 3 times before we eventually went up there with the team. But Dave turned around and said to me, I need you to come up with the team on the Friday, the day before. And I said, why? And he said, I want everything to be the same. He said, I want you to do team sheets. He said, I don't want anyone else getting involved in that. So I had to tell my partner, Marie, that she was travelling up on the Saturday. So from the FA Vars point of view, maybe my only disappointment on the day was the fact that I never got to set up in the Royal Box with them. That was the only disappointment, maybe. And there is a great photograph taken by my media man now. He wasn't our media man at the time. And it does pop up every time on social media occasionally. And it looks like I'm absolutely saluting the Royal Box. I wasn't. I was struggling to see where Marie, my partner, was. And the bit underneath it says, Greg, our secretary, saluting the Royal Box. But I was just trying to pick out where she was, because at that final whistle, I wanted to be with her. But I didn't see her till about an hour afterwards, when I got to see her about for half an hour up in the Bobby Moore suite or something, and then we were back on the coach again. And it was the Vars journey was great. We had some lows. I think the lows. I support Dave in the fact that we've never ever won the Hampshire Senior Cup. That's the disappointing thing, and I think we turned a big corner a couple of weeks ago by winning the playoff final, because previously we'd lost in the playoffs before. I remember losing 1-0 to Froome and stuff like that, and that like you said, that when you're playing the lower ranked team, and to go out to the lower ranked team, that is always hard to take, and that was a real big low, I think, when we didn't get promoted then. But then in hindsight, looking at it, we knew that when we didn't get promoted, we weren't in a position to go up. Whereas now, the directors that we've got on board at the club have made the club that much more sustainable. And I just look that our priority for next season is that we look at longevity at step 3, maybe look at 15th, 16th position in the table. But you can't. I think realistically, you can't say, right, next season we're going to go in the league and we're going to barnstorm it again, because I think that'll be the wrong objective. We've got to look at the squad of players we've got. We've got some players that are coming to the end of their careers. We've had some great servants at Sholing Football Club. To have the amount of appearances that players have got behind them is just absolutely an amazing thing. And this goes back to what you said just now, Dave. I think this Dave Darper's managed to make the club a family-orientated club, not only on the field but off the field as well. And I think that's what will live with me forever. And there's been some great people at Sholing Football Club that are sadly no longer with us, who would really relish where we achieved to get the club to now.
The last question, Dave, because time's run away from us. But I'm looking at this league for next year for Sholing. AFC Totton, Basingstoke Town. Of course, these were, Totton and Basingstoke are new to the South League as well. But Beaconsfield Town, Bracknell Town, Chesham United, Didcot was winners of the Central Division. They're in there as well now. Dorchester Town, Gosport Borough, Hannibal Town, Harrow Borough, of course, with a reprieve because of Met Police's voluntary relegation, which is a real shame. Hayes and Yedding United, not that Harrow Borough staying up, that Met Police, we get that right in the first Hayes and Yedding United, Hendon, Hungerford Town, of course, they've come over from the Northern League, Merthyr Town, Plymouth Parkway, Paul Town, Salisbury, yourselves, Swindon Supermarine, Tiverton Town, Wharton and Hersham, of course, who come over from the Isthmian League, and Winchester City. So my question to you is, we know that AFC Tottenham will probably be your derby game, but where is the furthest travel for you out of that lot?
It would be it'll be our international trip, Merthyr and Plymouth Parkway.
Will they be your furthest? They going to be your furthest travels in, are they?
But yes, my media man put something out yesterday, and I'm sure they're just the 2 longest ones. What I think is really good, Dave, is the fact that obviously going up a league, even though we've got 3 games more to play, we've actually got our mileage reduced,
Right. Okay.
which is amazing because we have got teams in the league that we've played before, in the likes of Hungerford, Basingstoke, Didcot, Swindon Supermarine. So they're not new team, they're not new grounds to us. Looking at the division, half of the division will be new ventures for Sholing Football Club. And my media man yesterday posted out that he believes there are 7 games that are 70 miles or less, which would technically turn around and say, well, we don't really need to use a coach for that.
Yeah.
So if you think of £800 a time for a coach, to be able to save that amount of money is really going to help support the club next year. And we all know that it's the cost of running a football club that can be its own demise, because of the way the clubs budget themselves, maybe, But I believe with the new directors that we've got on board, they're very, very forthcoming in what they want to do, where they want to put the club to. They've made some recruitment behind the scenes on the committee as well, with some positivity stuff there. We've got a clubhouse now that is being managed and is being used 6 of the 7 days a week, which I think is essential to any club now. You can't just rely on your football income. I think you've got to look at what you've actually got within your club and make it work for what's best for the club. And I think Sholing Football Club are actually in that position now, along with the likes of Tottenham. I think there's 2 clubs going up there with the same sort of blueprint, and I think it's going to be good for the league. We're going to have some old acquaintances, meeting up with Basingstoke, as I said, Didcot, Hungerford, Swindon Supermarine, among others. Another long trip to Merthyr, a lovely trip to Plymouth Parkway on a Tuesday night.
Happy days. Listen, Greg, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today, and we wish you all the very best in your secretarial retirement. Wish you all the best in your new venture, of course, in radio as well, and we wish you all the very, very best with that. And of course, also wish Sholing all the very best for new ventures, and of course a new season that starts, of course, in August. So we'll be looking forward to that. But a massive thank you for Greg for joining us. Massive thank you for you for joining us as well. And we'll be back next week. Well, we've had his dad. Well, why not have his son on? So, of course, joining us in our next episode will be Lee Allinson from Hendon, of course, the manager down there at Hendon. But until next time, thank you and good night.